A society, you know, in New York City, studies have shown that something like 70% of Jewish girls who grow up in New York City get a nose job by the time they're 16 years old. You know, that's not to say, you know, what I'm saying is that there are problems in Muslim societies, but we also have problems here. And there's a pressure on women, and it's getting worse and worse. It starts at 16, it doesn't end when you're 50. And the constant bombardment of images of women over and over and over on the street, on signs, in magazines, on TV, makes people feel so unhappy with how they look. I mean, this doesn't have anything to do with the weight problem. How many Canadian women, if you took a poll right now, would say that they're unhappy with the shape of their body? And take that poll in a country that, you know, that doesn't have this affluence or doesn't have this culture of visuality. Will you find, what percentage of women will you find being unhappy with their body shape? It'll be a huge difference. So, you know, we have to be aware of that. We have to be aware that there are serious problems with the image, with the way images are used in this society, and it's affecting women in a real way. It's causing them to mutilate themselves, to undergo surgery, to inject silicone in all sorts of places. I mean, to go under general anesthesia. I mean, think about it. I listened on public radio. Public radio in the United States is like CBC. So this is the one place where you can get intelligent conversation. A 3-hour afternoon program that is hosted by a 50-year-old woman. She spent 3 hours talking about plastic surgery for women, about taking fat out of, you know, a certain place in the thigh and injecting it into the cheek to make you look younger. And I mean, it was from top to bottom. This is an intelligent solution to the image of women in society. You know, I don't want to dwell on it too much, but maybe I'm a little bit frustrated having followed the news much more closely the past couple months than I normally do. You know, because of the situation since September 11th, I've watched a lot more TV, read a lot more newspapers, a lot more general interest publications, just because I felt that I need to be aware of sort of what the average person, the average American, and I live in America, you know, what they're reading. And it's just amazing to me how there are such superficial impressions of Islam and of Muslim women. And it's a problem because it affects policy. You know, it not only affects attitudes, but it goes down and it filters down and affects major policies. Now, this is not to say, and I want to move to my next section, that there are not problems in Muslim societies, or that women are not sometimes oppressed in the name of religion or in the name of Islam, because this happens. This happens often. I mean, anywhere there's someone who wants to commit violence or oppression, they will use the most powerful discourse that's around them. And in some areas, that will be a tribal discourse. So, for example, in many parts of Afghanistan, where religion, you know, seems to have penetrated very lightly, they will talk about the code of the Pashtuns, and they will use that to justify certain practices. So, for example, it's part of Pashtun practice that instead of a man giving a gift to his wife at the wedding, two fathers arrange to, you know, the one father says, well, I'll let your son marry my daughter, and your son will marry my daughter, and that's it. We'll just call it a deal. There's a term for this in Islamic law called shigar, and it's prohibited in Islamic law. But if you go to Afghanistan among those tribes, they'll say, no, well, this is our culture, this is our tradition. So they use their most powerful discourse, which is the discourse of their culture and their tribalism, to justify what they do to oppress some women in their society. In Muslim societies, you will find people using Islam as a justification for all kinds of oppression. That's absolutely true. But that doesn't mean that Islam is the cause, truly supports that oppression or supports those practices. One example, a very good example, are honor killings, which go on in particular in Jordan, Syria, Lebanon. That area in particular, there's a kind of tradition of honor killings. This is also prohibited in Islamic law. In Islamic law, if someone, goes as a vigilante and murders someone out of some kind of justification, speculation, then they're considered a murderer and should have capital punishment. But for years this went on in places, and it was, unfortunately, there were even religious scholars who would justify it. Now, there's been a lot of work done on that over the past few decades, and these countries now have banned this, and they've agreed to crack down. But it took time because there was a kind of reactionaryism among some of the religious classes, some of the religious communities, because so much was lost under colonialism. So much of Islamic law was lost. The colonialists came, they took away civil law, they took away criminal law, they took away the ability to govern the marketplace, they took away inheritance, they overthrew the foundations and the endowments, and they left this tiny little area of family law. And so the Muslims often became very reactionary about it, very defensive, and it became frozen in a way that it wasn't before. We could see, if we read the law books and the books of fatwa, which are the opinions of the jurists, how law is applied century to century, we see continued growth and interpretation and development, but then we see a kind of stagnation, a freezing, once colonialism sets in, and then in the post-independence period, because people are trying to hold on to something that they feel is slipping away. And then also, because the family is all that's left in sort of the purview of the religious community, they become more and more conservative about that area. So there's an unfortunate dynamic that set in place about many of these things. But I feel that's getting a lot better now. I mean, I think most societies are now beyond that and have been able to examine these things. And most Muslim scholars are aware of these problems and are trying to really deal with them in the proper way. One of the reasons that many of these societies are being forced to deal with these problems, frankly though, is because women themselves have put these issues on the table. And Muslim women have been involved in societies from Pakistan to Egypt, all across the Muslim world, in really raising these issues and in going back into Islamic law and digging out the authentic sources and saying, look, there are certain things in our society that are being done, that are being justified in the name of religion, and they aren't. In fact, it's contradictory to religion, and our religion, our holy book, the Quran, the example of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, gave us rights. And we're not getting those rights. And sometimes there were very bad reactions, but often there were good reactions too. And anyone who fairly looks at the development of scholarship towards women over the last 50 years will see that Muslim scholars have been listening to women and reinterpreting things to the benefit of women. And we could look at some examples just in North America. I remember going to Islamic Society of North America convention 15 years ago in Dayton, Ohio. And I remember at that point, not only were there no women on the stage, but any woman who had a question had to write her question on a piece of paper and send it up to the front, because it was considered improper for a woman to even stand up in the audience and ask a question. But that was 15 years ago. It's not a lot of time. Now, not that I in any way deserve it, it's a big responsibility, but this same organization elected me as their vice president, the head for all of the United States.